What's kind of like the process with consumer products? And I know with Disney, everything is thought out.
It's never just going to be, well, Mickey and Halloween, and that does it all. What they're going to come up with a very specific story. What's the story for Christmas? And how is that going to impact the kind of story we tell in our parade or even for events? We're going to do Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween at Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. Like a book illustration, you have all of the bells and whistles, all those different elements, but ultimately it's about the relationship of the characters. You would get a 0.8 of a second to attract the consumer's attention. To try to have an authentic, emotional story that you tell with the character. That emotional content is the thing that grabs the consumer's attention. I first met with a Disney recruiter in Christmas of 1989. He's like, are you serious? You really want to work for Disney? Oh, are you kidding me? Tears in my eyes, the whole thing. And he puts his arm around me. You definitely have a future with us. And each year I would submit my portfolio, and I wouldn't get into the training program. And so from the guy putting his arm around me, telling me I definitely had a future, it was Christmas 1995 when I finally got the call. She called me and she said, "Oh, I know it's a big move, but would you consider coming to Burbank, California to work for Disney?" I was like, "You kidding me? I'll walk. I'm on my way right now." Hi, my name is John Quinn. I'm a character art director with Disney Consumer Products. And since 2012, I think, I've been leading the 3D team, the digital 3D team. So my team and I model all of the ornaments, not all, but most of the ornaments and collectibles and some toys and things that you would see on what we call vertical business, the owned and operated businesses of Disney parks, all of the retail, Disney Store. I worked in licensed merchandise for 26 years before. Now I'm in Florida working at the parks. So I worked on a lot of things that you would see at Target or Walmart or wherever you are on the planet.
Yeah.
I was a 2D character artist for many, many years until 2012. Then I really began to focus primarily on 3D.
So you started telling me the story before we were recording. So you went to school for in the visual arts. You wanted to be an animator. Could you just didn't get it on the recording, so could you just kind of
I studied illustration at the School of Visual Arts in New York. Disney had an animation studio here in Florida, and they would go to New York to recruit for the animation studio. And since I was a little kid, I wanted to work for Disney in animation. I got a call from a woman in Burbank, California, who represented Disney Consumer Products. She saw my portfolio and wanted to hire me. And I thought, oh, okay, great. It's a foot in the door, and I'll work my way down the street to the animation studio. But very quickly, what I realized was, number one, consumer product. Well, I didn't know anything about consumer products, right? I mean, my whole focus was on drawing and developing a portfolio that would help me get a job in animation. Everything I had ever read was that they told you Disney doesn't want to hire cartoonists; they want people who could really draw. So I really focused on drawing. I'm 61, so there's a lot of history, so I'm going to get jumbled up. Anyway, once I got into consumer products, I realized this was such a kind of exciting career that I didn't know anything about. There were so many creative opportunities within it. I was designing product, working on a variety of different characters. I mean, part of me still wishes I had gotten an opportunity to work in animation, but I did a little bit here and there. Before working for Disney, I worked for Ralph Bakshi in New York City on a short that he did for Cartoon Network. So I was able to scratch that itch. So 90, I started in 96. I worked as a traditional 2D character artist for many, many years. So our experience was we would design product or we would work with licensees. Licensees buy the license to put Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, Cinderella, either put them on their backpacks, baseball caps, or, sculpt them to make bookends and things, Christmas ornaments, all kinds of stuff. So we would work with those licensees to design a line of product featuring these characters, making sure the storytelling was appropriate. And then it would go to a factory. Generally, it would go to a factory in China and they would do all the sculpts in clay. So this is back in the 90s, early 2000s. So this is before digital sculpting. And once digital sculpting modeling really started to get a foothold in the industry, then my boss said to me, well, we really need to get ahead of the curve here. We have to set up a 3D team. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know Maya or ZBrush or anything. So I had to hire people. And then I had hired people who were, I would ask them, I would set up meetings on Friday morning in a little classroom and they would teach me. So I learned ZBrush on the job.
Wow.
And it was tricky at first, but once I got past the craziness of the interface, there's so many menus and so many bells and whistles.
Yeah.
Once you understand how, what are the bells and whistles that you need to do the thing that you want to do, then it really started to make sense to me. I'm a stronger modeler than I am a renderer. I'm not a strong renderer at all. The kids that I've hired right out of school, they go to school for animation and they realize animation is really quite tedious, but they fall in love with modeling.
Yeah.
But they still come to us with more understanding of rendering than I have at this point still.
I think kind of in today's market, you really need to have a strong understanding of rendering if you want to get hired as a 3D modeler, because I think a lot of people are, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, as somebody in the hiring position, I think a lot of people are looking at the final product rendered and that's what they're judging it based off of. As in, they're not just looking at the raw image, they want to see it presented nicely. So if you have a great model but it's not rendered nicely, it doesn't sell it in the same way, and it's not as compelling.
Us, we'll use a lot of we'll use rendering for a couple of different ways. Disney Channel, Disney Junior shows that are CG generated. So in the past, like I said, I was a 2D character artist, and we would do a Winnie the Pooh portfolio, a style guide, and that style guide would go out to all of the people, all of the businesses that owned a license to use Winnie the Pooh or Mickey or whoever on their product. And we would do all of the drawings and the graphic elements, the design, the type. And so then your company makes baseball caps, and you get this style guide, and you're able to use those elements to design your product. And the same is true with, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse or Doc McStuffins or any of the CG generated shows on Disney Junior. We'll do 2D traditional sort of hand drawn stuff, but we'll also have to create CG art so that the consumer can see that it looks exactly the way it does on the show. And so we'll get the rigs from Disney Channel to pose Mickey and Minnie and render them out. So not only for consumer products, but then for packaging. We have to work 18 months to a year, and a year is very tight. So we're like to try to be 18 months out before, if let's say we're working on a feature film. In order for product to be on the shelf when the film releases, we have to deliver our style guide 18 months before that film release date. And so sometimes color palettes really aren't nailed down. Different details will change. And so sometimes you'll see things on store shelves that aren't exactly as they are in the film, because in the film they were able to make the change. But by that
Oh, interesting.
time the change was made, we're already at the factory in China. And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
earliest thing we have to do is create the packaging poses, because that's the first thing that gets done on the in the process of making a toy. When you if you ever go to a factory in China, the packaging is already created, and
Hmm.
it's going down the assembly line, and you've got a leg and a head, and they're putting this together, and they're putting in, they're painting on eyebrows, and then they're putting the little twist ties and connecting it to the packaging. The packaging, by the time it gets to the end of the conveyor belt, it's all put together in that packaging, and it goes in a crate.
Hmm.
So the very first thing they have to do is send the packaging design to the printer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so we do a lot of CG rendering for uh, packaging before we even work on the product.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm curious, like, so it sounds like it was always kind of a dream of yours to work at Disney. When it was kind of that was kind of the goal
Yeah,
from the
for
get
sure.
go.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my parents would take us. I grew up in New Jersey, and my parents would take us to here down to Orlando to go to Disney World. And I mean, I love Disney animation. I remember I was born in 1964, and I remember going to see Disney's Robin Hood when it was released in 1973. So I think I was 9,
Hmm.
and I just remember being knocked out by it. By And I know it's not considered like a classic, and it's not one of Disney's greatest, but it really had a huge impact on me. And I think it was the character design and the animation, and maybe I wasn't all that uh, tuned into the idea of a great story or whatever, but it's still one of my favorites. I can watch it again and again and again.
Yeah.
Um, Coming to Walt Disney World as a kid, um, outside of the Pirates of the Caribbean, they had a little vending machine that sold Mark Davis's concepts for the Pirates for
Wow.
5 cents a postcard. And I remember, I think I still have some of them somewhere in a flat file. Those and the Country Bears, the concepts for the
Hmm.
Country Bears. And I didn't know Mark Davis's name. I later found out who it was, but those had such a profound effect on me, particularly the bears, because they were, um, I was a kid, so I didn't know any better. But they're very cartoony when I look at them now. But when I was a kid, I thought, oh my God, these are real bears, but they have such personality.
Yeah.
Uh, it was it really did have such an extraordinary, uh, profound effect on me as a kid, and so that's what I wanted to be a part of. And what I was saying earlier about getting into consumer products, I thought, well, this is what I wanted to do was uh, draw. I love to draw. So here I got this job where I get to draw every day. That's amazing. And I get to tell stories with these characters. And I get to be a part of as corny as this is, I was so proud to be part of the sort of continuing history of this
Mm. Hmm.
company that inspired me so much as a kid.
So I saw on your LinkedIn that you've been there since 1996. Yeah.
Yeah, 29 years.
Wow. I was born in '96. That's kind of crazy for me
Wow.
to.
I had black hair when I started.
Wow.
That
That's so
was
you've been
probably,
there. That's a long time. So when you were there, I imagine it's changed a lot in the time you've been there. Because I mean, obviously it was already a well established company by 1996, but it was not the same sort of media giant that it is now. What kind of changes have you seen in your time working there?
yeah, well, it has changed tremendously. I mean, when I started, we didn't have computers. So everything
Hmm.
was pencil on paper. Um, as I was saying earlier, we would get factories in China would do the clay sculptures of bookends or flower pots or whatever it was. And they would send us photos of turnaround photos of the sculpture.
Hmm.
We would put we get the photos, we put them on the color Xerox. And sometimes we would actually get the sculpts. If we had local sculptors working with us, we would actually get
Hmm.
the sculpt. And we would use a Polaroid camera with an extended lens so that you could get close up, because the Polaroid lenses weren't very good. So they had this mechanism that you could get a pretty decent close up. Because if you're working on something that's a sculpture that's this big, you need to have a decent photo of it. We would blow it up on the Xerox machine, put tracing paper over it, and do our corrections. Grumpy's nose should be this shade.
Hmm.
Um, and then you would send as many drawings as you could back to the factory, FedEx. So we were drawing on paper and using FedEx every
Wow.
day, all the time. And then it would take whatever, a week to get to the factory. They would make the changes and send more photos back. And it wasn't until we started working in Photoshop, working digitally, it changes everything. So now I still do product approvals. It's all done through our online product approval system. The photographs come in. I just pull them into Photoshop, make my corrections, drop them back into the online product approval system, and they're instantly back there. So if they're
Yeah.
trying to beat, oh, we got to get this done before Chinese New Year because everything shuts down for a month or whatever it is. Um, Before Chinese New Year, it gets super, super busy. There's tons and tons of stuff they're trying to get through the factories before the factories shut down.
Yeah.
But you can do that now because of
Right. Right. It's
that's,
instant.
to me, that's the biggest change. When I
Wow.
started, there were a bunch of old timers there. I was 31 when I started, and then um, there were guys at the end of their careers. And once they started introducing computers, they were like, "Oh, I'm not learning that. I'm not going to work on a computer." And I always felt that the more versatile you are, and the more tools you can learn, the greater the chances of a long career you can have.
Hmm.
Disney's a rare thing in that people, like I said, I'm right at 29 years doorstep, and we just celebrated one of my coworkers 30 years. So Disney is the kind of place where you can have a really long career, and I've been
Yeah.
so lucky to have a creative career, um, steady work. I've got a
Yeah.
wife, I've got kids, so it's been
Yeah.
very, very good for me.
Yeah. What's kind of like the process with consumer products, and how closely do you work, let's say, with the kind of Imagineering and because you're saying you're working kind of in the theme park products. So, and I know with Disney, everything is thought out, like everything, it has to be
Yeah.
exactly so. So what's kind of
So
the process?
Disney Entertainment is the division that's going to, and I haven't had all that much interaction with them, to be honest. I've only been here 3 years,
Hmm.
and Disney Entertainment is going to work. They'll work with our team, the creative leads on the consumer product side, because they're going to figure out what's the story for Christmas, and how is that going to impact the kind of story we tell in our parade, or what's the story for Halloween, or even for events. We're going to do Oogie Boogie Bash at Disneyland, or we're going to do Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween at Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. And so it's never just going to be, well, Mickey and Halloween, and that does it all. What they're going to come up with a very specific story, and the costuming and the parade that they have is going to have a very specific story. So I know there was, um, you know, it's hard to like remember exactly what year this was. Santa was having trouble keeping organized all the letters he was getting from kids around the world. So Mickey and Minnie volunteered to help him out. I think that was the story. So
Hmm.
well, my point is they have a very specific story to tell. Once that gets settled, then we'll do a style guide about that. That style guide will then go to the merchants and the product development team, and they're going to determine these are the products that we want at this retail location, And we're looking at um, the big shops in Walt Disney World, but also all of the little specific shops that are in each of the resorts on the cruise line. This hotel, that hotel, Alani, the resort in Hawaii. So everything is very specific for those locations. And then we'll take the Christmas program and we'll run it through the filter of those specific locations. And then the product development teams will say, we need to develop these housewares, and we need to develop these ornaments, and we need to develop these tabletop items, these home items, cake plates, mugs, whatever. And then that's when my team gets involved. And very often the style guide will not have, the style guide tries to be all things to all people. It's not generic, but it's like the poses that are the character poses that are in the style guide are not going to be specific to product development for a mug or a cake plate or even an ornament sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where my team gets involved, is we'll help them figure out how to best pose the characters, because we have to consider how it's the manufacturing process, how it's going to be molded, and what material is it going to be made out of. And then you look, well, if this is going to be ceramic, this pose is too crazy, the silhouette is too abstract, and we have to think about these things being produced overseas, put in a shipping container, and floated across the Pacific Ocean to get to Long Beach, California.
Yeah.
You're constantly thinking about how these things are going to survive. Are they going to break?
Yeah.
So we're trying to tell as much of a story as we can, but minimize potential breakage and damage.
Yeah. So I'm curious in that vein, like, so can you kind of talk about what's kind of your design philosophy for telling a story with a sort of static posed, whatever it is, whether it's a mug or an ornament or whatever the product is, what's kind of your way of telling the story in that, again, it's not like a action figure, right, where you kind of have an A pose and the kids kind of play with it. Here you want the whole story kind of packaged in the as it is.
So for me, it's character interaction. So I just want to make, even if it's generally going to be Mickey and Minnie. I did an ornament for the one of the Alaska cruises, where they're sort of looking in the sky at the aurora borealis, and it's Mickey pointing up at the sky. But how do you get Mickey to point up at the sky but demonstrate that he's with Minnie, that she's as enthused as he is about it? So to me, it's really trying to get that character interaction. The story I tell all the time is, I worked as a student. I worked really, really hard on drawing, and thinking the drawing skill is really the thing Disney wants. They want really great drawers. But as soon as you get in there to Disney, you realize the drawing got my foot through the door, but storytelling is the most important thing. We had when I started, we had Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston come speak to us. And Frank and Ollie were two of Disney's storied nine old men, two really great animators. They wrote a book called Disney Animation, The Illusion of Life. It's sort of a big Bible.
Yeah.
And I thought, I was brand new, and I thought they're going to come and talk to us about drawing and talk about animation technique or maybe timing or whatever. They didn't talk about drawing at all. They talked about character and acting.
Mm-hmm.
These two guys were in their 80s, and they stood up in front of the group of us and did like an improv. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me. They used their drawing skill in the service of telling a story, that the dynamics between the two characters and how those dynamics inform the type of posing, and how do you communicate that to your audience without dialogue. So for us, That's what we're trying to do is we've got one static image. Either it's a piece of character art drawn or it's 3D character art. And for me, the thing that I focus most on is you have a scene, you have the elements of your scene, and they're, Winnie the Pooh's holding a honey pot, but it's the interaction of those two characters, and so the consumer becomes kind of a voyeur in a way.
Mm.
You're sort of eavesdropping on this sweet little moment between these two characters, and I try to approach. Uh, excuse me. I try to approach any of these things like a book illustration. You
Yeah.
know, it's Mickey. I didn't design this. I modeled it, but I didn't design it. But Mickey is shaking the package to see if he could figure out what's inside, and Minnie's sort of admonishing him to behave himself. Um, but yeah, I mean, to me, it's you have um, all of the bells and whistles, the all those different elements, but ultimately it's about the relationship of the characters.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've so many people have said a similar thing with this idea about storytelling, that I think a lot of artists, especially those who are starting out, get very caught up in the design, right? And it has to look cool, and and that they get very focused on making it look, like, oh, and I want it to have this and that and the other, and ultimately the most important thing is the story, right? That's the purpose of all of this, right? Is to tell stories,
Exactly.
you know.
That's the
Yeah.
thing that people are going to respond to. I mean, they used to do studies of in licensing when mom was going through the racks of apparel. What does she want to buy? And you would get, I don't know what they said, zero point 0.8 of a second to attract
Hmm.
the consumer's attention. And you could just have what we would call ta-da. You have the character standing there going ta-da,
Yeah.
or you can try to have an authentic emotional story that you tell with the character. And we believe, Disney believes, that that emotional content is the thing that grabs the consumer's attention.
Mm. No, it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. I'm curious, in kind of working in Disney, um, and you're working on these projects, and you're trying to infuse it with story. How much do you have the ability to kind of dictate the story versus how much is it kind of given to you? Like, this is what we need. How do you kind of like balance the two?
Well, it's pretty. As I said, the style guide, the story is going to be established by entertainment and the style guide, and then we have some flexibility to make that story work for the specific product type. Um, I know we just had a conversation about the food and wine celebration at Epcot, and we're looking at, I think it's first quarter of 2027, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's fourth quarter of 2026. And the we've got the style guide, and the poses aren't exactly what we need, but the product development people are wide open to, well, if you can come up with better, stronger poses for us, but we do need it to be consistent, because they're going to do, like I said, they're going to do ornaments, but they're going to do mugs, they're going to do plates, they're going to do all kinds of different things. For food and wine, they're going to do spatulas, they'll do all sorts of food related product. It all has to relate. They want a consistent um, message on the sales floor. So you
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to say, this is food and wine 2026 or whatever. And so the color palette, the character costumes, generally what the characters are doing. If you have Donald Duck, with a mixing bowl, or Donald Duck, flipping a hamburger, then we're going to try to keep that consistent throughout. But
Mm-hmm.
we'll we have the flexibility to come up with stronger poses and maybe push the storytelling a little bit more.
But you kind of have to keep it within the certain confines of, like you're
Yeah.
saying, Donald Duck is doing this. Okay, you can push it, but keep him doing whatever it is that he's doing.
And very often they're going to say, "Oh, we're going to be inspired by a mid-century modern style," and they may choose the Floyd Gottfredson King Features comic strips from the 40s and 50s, which have a very distinct look. And so, if that's the story they're going to tell, if that's the style they're going to use to tell that story for that program, then we have to stick within
Right.
that style.
Right.
But yeah, if we can come up with better poses, which we've done a million times.
Yeah.
Particularly when it's like ceramic mugs, or I keep saying cake plates, because those are the things that are, you got to keep them really simple, not only for breakage issues, but just for the strength of the thing. It's a pedestal, and the character will be the pedestal.
Oh, I see.
And so if you've got a character with this really wide open silhouette, it's not going to work. And you want to try to, how can you, you don't want to have a character holding the cake plate up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in that character's life, when are they holding up a cake plate that in their world is enormous, right?
Right. So
they may be carrying, Goofy may be carrying a big, a whole bunch of packages, and at the top of the packages is the cake plate. But you also want, like I said, you want to make sure that it's dimensional enough so that it's going to support that it's not going to, if it's ceramic, that they're going to put it in the packaging and it's going to come across the Pacific Ocean, and it's not going to be in a million pieces when you open up the box.
Right.
So that's it. I hope I'm making sense. It's you.
No, absolutely.
You just want to be able to, you want to look at those, you want to look at the story that they're telling in the style guide, understand the kind of product they're going to make, think about the manufacturing process and the material that's going to use, and then try to thread that needle, try to come up with as realistic a story for whatever that character is, whoever that character is, but also make it function as the particular product that we're trying to sell.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, just to ask, how does it work with, they're obviously Disney parks all over the world, and now they just recently announced the Abu Dhabi, they're going to open one. How does it work, like, with different parks and creating different products for different regions of the world? Like, how much variation is there from one region to the other?
There's going to be some variation based on the trends and the consumer trends. So there are graphic and societal trends that impact Japan that are different than what happens here. Also, Disney parks in Japan are owned by Tokyo Land Company, I believe they're called. And I'm not certain about Disney's ownership. I think it might be a licensed thing.
Yeah, I heard something about this one time, that like they don't technically own it. Technically, it's owned by somebody else, and Disney like licenses all the rights.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they're great partners, so they're never trying to push the envelope to be disrespectful to the Disney name.
Yeah.
They are very, very respectful to the characters and the stories, the classic stories. So I'm pretty sure, I don't know if we have any ownership, if Disney has any ownership of those things, or if it's purely a license deal. The same may be true for the parks in China. So when they opened Shanghai, I did a painting for a poster, but that's the only involvement I've ever had with that. I've never done, I may have done some stuff for a parade in Hong Kong, but it's really rare. I know there's obviously a team in Japan for those parks. There's a team in Paris that manages their stuff. I don't do a lot of work for parks globally. It's Disney World, Disneyland, and then the resorts all over the world.
They try to keep people kind of like in the region working on, to kind of have the finger on the pulse of
Yeah, because even in licensing, there's an office in Hammersmith in London. and they manage. There's an office in Milan, Italy. They manage a lot of the publishing. The region is Europe and emerging markets.
Mm. Hmm.
But we have offices in all of these countries all over the world. But it may be a very small group of people who are
Yeah.
really business people to say, well, this is something we're seeing in our region, or
Yeah.
how could we address this relationship with this specific retailer in this specific country. I imagine working in Europe must be very challenging because there are so many different countries and so many different
Yeah.
retailers specific to those places.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I just recently went to Germany to we got a Spiel Warenmesse. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's like that the big toy expo, like the big it's like
yeah,
the
yeah,
trade show, and it was just like it was so fascinating. It was my first time going. It was just fascinating to see to kind of get like that sense of the industry, and it was very very like business oriented, but it was like it's a whole other world that you know like as a creative on the creative side you don't really think about the business side as much, but like it's yeah there's so much to. I mean obviously you're dealing with kind of global and IPs and all these kind of
yeah.
things, like, but it's yeah it's pretty like spectacular to see it all like in motion.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's the thing I would always tell people um, coming into Disney, that, it's a business, it's a big corporation. And
Yeah.
it's, you, you're, a lot of people are motivated by their own little pixie dust and why they want to be there. But ultimately, the company is there to make money.
Right.
And that's how the toy industry, too. It's a dog eat dog business.
Yeah.
It's very, very competitive. And, I think what I would say for young artists, particularly trying to get into this world, animation, video games, product development, just remember it really is ultimately about making money. Because if you're not
Right.
making money, you're not making films, you're not making games, you're not making anything.
Right.
And so, yes, you want to be entertaining, certainly. You want to do great work, but you have to remember it has to be successful. Otherwise, it's just, you're not going to be doing it for very long.
Right.
And I think I'm amazed at how jaded some kids are coming right out of school, and they're, like the company isn't doing enough for them. And I think you've got to roll up your sleeves and really work hard to succeed in any of these businesses. I think. I
Yeah.
also find the people that in my experience, when I'm looking at portfolios too, it's the people who are obsessive about their work are the people who are successful. The people
Mm.
who are just sort of like, well, I'm going to dip my toe in the water. Um, Sort of 9 to 5ers, I don't think they last very long. If you want to come to work and do your 9 to 5 and then go home, and everybody needs to have work-life balance. But I think the people who are successful in this business are obsessive about their work, about
Yeah.
constantly learning and growing and improving. Um, like I was saying earlier, those old timers, and they were at the end of their career, so I don't really fault them for it. But when computers were introduced, I was like, all right, sign me up. Let's learn this.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of guys that were like, I'm not doing that. To me, that's just, um, it's just not forward thinking. I
Yeah.
came in, they put me on the Winnie the Pooh team, and I just kept thinking, well, I better learn to draw Mickey Mouse because he's the center of this universe. And, and then when my boss said, we got to set up a 3D team, I'm a director. So I could have said, okay, I'm going to hire people and I'm just going to go to meetings and I'm not going to do any of the work. But I thought I really have to learn this stuff so I can understand, I could speak the language and understand whatever the challenges are that my team might be facing, or whether or not people were just lying to me,
Yeah.
If I said, why can't we get this done? And then they would just throw all this jargon at me. I had no
Right.
idea what they were talking about. So I just felt like, okay, and that's what I would do. I put a lot of time in, a lot of personal time. I had my day job, and then I had my night job of learning how to be a 3D guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, like maybe there's not really such a clear cut answer, but what do you think is like the most important skill for somebody starting out to like focus on and to try and, put their effort into?
Uh, well, I think the good thing about this podcast is that it's going to hopefully introduce people to the idea that there are career opportunities in product development. And, I have a lot of friends who teach, and they invite me to come speak at the schools, um, and nobody thinks of it. They all think of animation or illustration, and nobody has any idea that there are opportunities in this line of work. And so, I think a lot of kids will go and study animation, and they realize animation is too tedious for them, and they want to be 3D modelers. The thing that I want to see is that if you're trying to get a foot in get your foot in the door, I want to see that you work. Yeah, I want to see your classwork, but I also want to see you have personal work. That
Mm-hmm.
I love 3D modeling, and these are the things I did in my class, but I also did these. Personally, I love Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and that's what I do in my spare time. I model, Yogi Bear and Quick Draw McGraw just for practice, but I also love
Yeah.
that stuff. I love Don Bluth animated cartoons, so I go and I'll do the cast of The Secret of Nim. When I look at portfolios, I'll see stuff that's like from 2017, and I'll
Yeah.
think, what have you been doing since 2017? That your portfolio is filled with stuff that's that old. Like
Yeah.
you're telling me that you don't work very hard, that you're not really all that interested in it. And that's what I mean by being obsessive. I just think, if you want to work out, work out. Great. You like to watch movies? Great. Watch movies. But I would also like to see that you like to do 3D modeling and
Yeah.
that you're keeping your portfolio current.
Yeah. That's a big issue that a lot of people have is they, and just to your point, like their portfolio gets so outdated because they're so focused on professional work that they can't put in their portfolio. So their portfolio is, 10 years outdated because, they haven't been doing personal work to keep it updated. So then you end up in a situation where you have a senior level artist who has a junior level portfolio because they're not keeping it updated. And it just,
Right.
like you're saying, it's not a good look. And, for a number of reasons.
And honestly, now with Nomad on my iPad, I mean, traditionally I'd have to come up here to my studio all alone. Um, but with Nomad on the iPad, it's a $15 app.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's an incredibly robust app for 3D
Yeah.
modeling. So, now I could sit on the couch and my wife and I can watch TV together. It's weird. Like it's
Yeah.
amazing that I could spend as much time with my wife after, 40 years of marriage or whatever it is. I just don't think there are any excuses. I tell
Yeah.
kids, even 3D modelers, I do want to see that you're drawing and that you can, even if your drawings are terrible, I just want to see that you're thinking graphically,
Mm.
because I'll see a lot of portfolios that are, oh, I like this character designer. I found him on Instagram. I'm going to model this character. And then they model to camera, but then when you turn the model, it's jacked.
Yeah.
So people aren't thinking about, uh, and I think I get this from life drawing, and that's why I think keeping a sketchbook and drawing is so important. But they're not thinking about weight distribution. They're not thinking about the stuff that show the stuff. Even if you have one view of the thing, show the stuff you can't see by really doing the stuff you can see in a convincing manner.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, you have to be conscious of, even if it's just a two-dimensional drawing, you want to be conscious of 360-degree, where's that leg? How's that leg taking that weight? I can't really see what it's doing. What's the hip doing on the other side of the figure? I can't really see it, but I have to make sure that this character's weight is really planted.
Right.
And
Have
so
an understanding of it in space.
exactly. So, I see this all the time when it looks good from one view, but then when you rotate the model, you realize, well, you don't even know where the character's spine is. This is
Yeah.
really wonky back here.
Yeah.
Or, they'll work in perspective. So one foot is really low and then you turn it and the other foot's way up here.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. And I'm like, how did,
Yeah.
didn't you turn this? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just weird to me. So you also have to have the courage to have to take the artistic license to, I can't do what is being done in this two-dimensional drawing in order to make this thing stand up.
Yeah.
So I've got to give myself permission to push it a little bit.
Yeah. There's like a famous comic book cover for a Spider Woman, I think it was, and it's notorious because the pose she's in is like anatomically impossible. And like it was one of my teacher, my mentor, like he was talking about this and so he kind of pointed to this as an example of this very thing. It's like if you try to make this in 3D, like it makes zero sense whatsoever.
It's that Milo Manara
could be. It's like a famous one that like
yeah. I think I know what you mean.
Yeah. So no, it's I was talking to Shane Olson, and he does a lot of stylized character work.
Well, I know Shane.
Yeah, so he was telling me to the exact same point. He said so many people kind of model like they do like straight on from the front and straight on from the side. And he said all you really need is one good reference photo of a 3/4 view, and that's all you need for the image. Like if you have that, like that's your full character. It gives you the volume and everything you need to know there. People like to your point, people who just kind of try and do it straight up and straight to the side, and they say, why does it look nothing like the reference image? It's because again, you're lacking a fundamental understanding of what makes this character, who they are and what they are.
Yeah. Well, so traditionally the way it would work for us is the product development team would have to create turnaround drawings.
Mm-hmm.
But my team really understands these characters and understands how to work in 3D. So that's a lot of work for the product development teams that we don't need them to do. So if we get a really good, strong image, we can work from one image. We don't need all the different turnarounds, unless it's like a character we're not aware of and there's something specific going on their back that we don't know about. Yeah, we definitely are going to need to see that. But for the most part, we can work from one drawing.
Yeah. That's I think really what separates the men from the boys.
And I think it gets to the business side of it as well. The more efficient you can be, the more you're able to fill in the blanks. The better you are for whoever you're working for.
Yeah, definitely. There's a story one time. Paul Gabry over at ZBrush. I did a course with him. He was teaching 3D printing and like how to model for 3D printing. That was the idea. And he told a story that he was doing a project one time for Hasbro for, I don't remember which one of the Transformers, whoever it was, from one of the new films. And the only reference images they had were from the front. They didn't have any back images. So it was up to him to basically make it up what the back looked like, because, again, to this point, like you don't necessarily have all the information all the time. And so you have to be competent enough to, make it work.
Yeah. We, a couple of the guys on my team there, in Glendale, back when we were in California, we were doing a show. There was developing a show called Mickey's Roadster Racers for Disney Junior.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying, we have to be way ahead. So we were trying to get Mickey in his race car like 18 months before the show was going to premiere on the channel. And they didn't have any 3D assets. They didn't, all they had were drawings. So we actually modeled the characters in the cars, got them approved by the show creators so that we could start doing our CG renders for packaging. And what I heard was they took the cars that we built and sent them to the vendor, the animation studio. So I think they ended up, I don't know, they may have used it as a starting point, but
Yeah, that's
uh,
funny. I know it makes sense. It's a kind of it's like reverse engineering because you want it to be consistent throughout.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Well, we couldn't,
yeah,
we couldn't wait. We had to get it done. Otherwise, we weren't going to have product on the shelf.
right,
And
right,
fortunately, the show creators were like, "Yeah, please help us,"
nice,
because they hadn't
nice.
even chosen um, the uh, the animation studio yet.
Uh huh.
They
Oh
didn't even
wow,
know where. They didn't know it was going to be in the Philippines. Will it be Korea? Is it going to be France? Who knew?
wow,
Nobody knew.
wow. So it's really you guys are really getting it like way before anything
Way before,
happens.
yeah. I think it was Cars 3, the feature Cars 3, and we had product already in development. Um, and then at the last minute, they changed decals on
Uh
Lightning
huh.
McQueen in the film. So in the film, the decals are different than they were on the toys.
Uh huh.
I may be making that up, but I'm pretty sure that was Cars 3.
Do you think that's like exclusive to big companies like Disney, or do you think, as in, like, let's say you have a smaller brand making whatever a show, and they want to have products, are they kind of following that same formula, or is it kind of since Disney has the, you know, has the ability to like really be creating things on such a large scale, they could do that? As in, if I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a small scale product, a small scale show. Let's say for like I don't know, for whatever reason, Ben 10 comes to mind from Cartoon Network, right? As
Well, I
in,
think you know, dealing with factories in China and product development. So if you're making toys, then you have to cut steel to make molds.
right?
Uh, and then there, your injection molding and then your assembly line and all of that stuff, that takes time. You can't,
Yeah,
doesn't matter how small your production run is, all of that stuff takes time.
yeah,
And then, I don't know how long it takes, like 3 or 4 weeks to come across the Pacific Ocean. So, and then once it gets to Long Beach, then it has to be distributed across the United States and Canada
right.
or whatever. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it is, you've got to, I think you can be out maybe a year out.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, just kind of shifting gears a little bit. I'm kind of curious to hear your story of like your kind of journey through Disney. First of all, how did you like get into Disney? You touched upon that at the beginning, and then what was kind of your journey throughout Disney? Like, because you said you were consumer products, and specifically the department you're now. You said you've been there for like 3 years now. So, what was kind of like your journey in the 29 years you've been there? Can you take us through that?
So like I said, I started at School of Visual Arts in 1989. I was 25, and I went there because I was hoping that I could get recruited into Disney Animation. And Disney, every year I would meet with them and they would say, "Yes, submit your portfolio. You're great. You're great. You're great. We love you, kid." And then it would my portfolio would go through the review process. I first met with a Disney recruiter I tell everybody this story as well. First met with a Disney recruiter in 1989, Christmas of 1989. And he put his arm around me and he's like, "You definitely have a future with us." He's like, are you serious? You really want to work for Disney? Oh, are you kidding me? Tears in my eyes, the whole thing. And he puts his arm around me. "You definitely have a future with us." And each year I would submit my portfolio and I wouldn't get into the training program. One time my portfolio went down to Florida for review and I never got it back. And I called them and they said, "Oh, somebody saw it and wanted to send it out to Burbank." And so I always got really, really close, but I never got into the training. But they sent it out to Burbank for a special effects animation training program. And I didn't get into that either. And so from the guy putting his arm around me, telling me I had definitely had a future, it was Christmas 1995 when I finally got the call. I had graduated. I was already graduated. I was teaching and I was a freelance illustrator. And I asked the chairman of the department, would you mind if I submitted my portfolio to Disney Animation when they come? And he's like, no, no, that's fine. Go ahead. And then I got the call from Burbank from Consumer Products. And like I said, I was like, oh, I really want to be an animator, so I'll get my foot in the door out there. And she called me and she said, oh, I know it's a big move, but would you consider coming to Burbank, California to work for Disney? I was like, you kidding me? I'll walk. I'm on my way right now. Um, but as soon as I got in there, I thought, this seems, because there were people who had been working there for 20 years. And I thought, oh, okay, this is pretty steady work. And even at the height of animation, I kept thinking, this isn't going to last. I just didn't think, because animation is such a nomadic lifestyle. People work on a show and then they get laid off, and then they go back and work on another show and they get laid off. And I was working with people at Consumer Products who had worked in animation in the 80s, and they were just really burned out by it, the inconsistency of it.
Yeah.
So I was able to get a pretty clear idea that with a wife and kids, I wanted something steady. And it was really, really fun. So I started out on the Winnie the Pooh team. I feel like I was doing Winnie the Pooh Christmas for like 3 years straight. Just that's all it was Winnie the Pooh, lots and lots of Christmas. I was walking my daughter to school, and there was a kid in front of us with a backpack with one of my drawings on it. So it was like, it was probably 2 years before I started to see my work in the marketplace. But that was, obviously that was a huge thrill. I was like, hey, that's my drawing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I worked, and then at the time I started, it was Mickey, Winnie the Pooh, and then the feature films. But the business was probably 12 billion globally at the time. And now it's like 65 billion with Lucas and Marvel and everything. Yeah. So things started to slow down for Winnie the Pooh, and they were concerned that things were slowing down for the feature films, because like Lion King had been huge, but then Pocahontas and Hunchback and then Hercules, they weren't selling the product as much as they had been before. So they brought in all new leadership and they completely reorganized the business. So I went and I was leading the character art group for the apparel team. So I worked in apparel, which was interesting because I went in and I worked on all different kinds of product, but I really focused on the characters. And then for a couple of years, I was on the apparel team, learning the very specific challenges of those companies that make apparel, learning about fabrications and the way apparel is produced, and the kinds of factories they use, the challenges they have with embroidery, accessories, backpacks, bags, watches, all of that stuff was part of the apparel team. So I really learned a lot about that's when I really learned a lot about product development. And then that
how different is, sorry to cut, just
go ahead.
How different is like product development for apparel versus for, mugs and plates and stuff like?
Well, there's no molding. It's going to be graphic, and you're going to think about color limitations for silkscreen. Like I was saying earlier about Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, if we do a CG render, that's going to be a four color process. So the screens are going to be very, very fine little dots, and you're going to have you're going to have cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. As opposed to a lot of times it's just flat color, line and fill. And then for the silk screens, you'll have a limit of, maximum it's 12 colors, but most of the time it's a lot fewer colors than that, which is challenging when you have princesses. So they all have different color dresses, and they all have different color hair, and some of them have different color skin, and and if you have you want to do a nightshirt for a little girl with 6 different princesses on it, and how do you reduce that to 12 colors? So it was that kind of stuff, just understanding the specific challenges that they
limitations.
were facing. Yeah, the
Yeah.
limitations that they were facing. For, now I do mostly 3D, and you have to think about, they'll want to look at, we want to add a light up feature to this. So then you have to think about how big is that mechanism that they're going to use? And there's a group of mechanisms that they'll use for sound or for light up, and then you have to design around that. And you also want to think about, like I was saying earlier, what material you're going to use, ceramic or dolomite or whatever, and then the impact that the material has on the amount of detail you can have. And then you have to think about paint. How difficult is it going to be for them to paint all of these different elements, and what does that do to impact the cost? How is Disney going to, will this meet whatever the specific cost limitation that Disney wants to meet? Will the factory be able to do it? So sometimes there's pushback from the factory. We just can't do that. So we may have to remove some details or some elements or whatever. So, obviously, I'm sure that's the same with the apparel team. But I wasn't that intimate with it. It was, for me, it was creating the art that would be used on apparel, and then considerations of color and limitations and things like that.
Yeah. On that point, how much of it like falls on you as the director, to kind of sort out those things with the factory about the cost, and like, does all that fall on you, or is there somebody else?
So you have product development teams, you have sourcing teams, and the sourcing teams are the ones that are sourcing the factory. They're gonna help. The merchants are going to say, these are the kinds of products. Well, we've done things like this before, and they're very, very successful. Or this kind of a thing is really trending. Moms love this kind of a thing. And when they visit the park and they see one of these with Mickey on it, they're going to love it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's this specific product that we have in mind. We want to make these, and then they may say, we want to do it in these 15 colors or whatever. And then the sourcing people will say, that's not really realistic. The factory can do it for this. And they go through all of the numbers, and they have to figure out, whatever it costs that for Disney to have the factory produce it, then Disney has to figure out, well, how is that going to impact the price when we put it on the shelf, and will the consumer bear that price? It's just a constant balancing act.
So by the time it gets to you, they've already had all that stuff sorted out. They're saying, okay, here's...
Not necessarily. When it comes to us, that may still be part of the discussion. And so as we're modeling it, there's usually... When we have a weekly meeting, and the sourcing people will be in the meeting, and we'll be, it's just an open discussion. Well, we're thinking about trying this, and they'll say, okay, well, I want to see... I recently did a salt and pepper shaker set, and they were concerned about the concept drawing, and they thought, oh, looking at that drawing, they were like, there's no way they're going to be able to make this in ceramic. And I said, I'll just block in a quick little model for you. So, and they sent it to the factory, and I got some notes from the factory. If you do this, A, B, and C, we can produce this. And so that's what we did.
Yeah.
So sometimes the drawing, the will identify what we think might be a molding issue or a material issue, but the sourcing people are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're saying, oh, there's just no way we can make that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so going back, so you were on the apparel team, and then where'd you go from there?
So then I kept saying the character artist, because we had a hard lines team, we had a toys team. Hard lines would be like home goods, gifts and stationery. They would work with Hallmark, but there was also a toy team that worked with Mattel and Hasbro. There was a fast moving consumer goods team, which would do like cereal and candy and chicken nuggets and things like that. They would work on the packaging. So we had all of these different teams, and each one of those teams had a group of character artists. But the problem was that character art should have been centralized. And I kept saying character art really should be centralized. Because our duty our number one duty is to the characters in the stories and keeping the characters consistent. So you would have like a box of chicken nuggets at a supermarket with a Mickey on it that was not consistent with the Mickeys that were on the apparel or the toy team. And the same thing with princesses, particularly with the princesses, because they're so challenging to draw. And and then globally, we do all of this character art and we share it around the world. And in our global regional offices, we're saying, well, the character art's not very consistent. So
Uh-huh.
anyway, um, the powers that be realized it might be better to centralize the character art team. So then they centralized the character, and I was running the character art team as a central sort of center of excellence over all, providing character art for all of the businesses.
Hmm.
And then there was another reorg, and then that was 2012 when I got put in charge of 3D. So we
Hmm.
had a team out here in Orlando. I was still in Glendale, California at the time. So in Glendale, we focused mostly on licensing. I did a lot of work for Hallmark. We would do, like when they developed the new DuckTales show, it's a 2D animated show. There would be no 3D assets for it. So my team would work with the show creators to develop 3D assets so that the toy team would then be able to develop toys. So the whole toy line was based on the models that my team created.
Uh-huh.
And then along the lines, uh, the they were looking to consolidate the the park creative group with the licensing creative group. So somewhere along the line, they um, the group that is here started reporting into the vice president that was running our department, the creative department for licensing. So then he was in charge of uh, licensed and vertical, which is the owned and operated stuff. And then I guess just before the pandemic, we ended up getting a new boss, and there was another. There's in corporations, there's always a reorg. So just before the pandemic, we got a new vice president to run our department. He was then officially in charge of licensed and vertical, and um, the 3D team out here then fell under my umbrella. And then in 20, I guess toward in the pandemic, they announced that they were closing down the office in Glendale and they were moving everybody to a campus here in Orlando, Florida. So at my age, I didn't want to try to. I wanted to stay in California, but I just figured it'd be better just to keep, finish out my career with Disney.
Yeah.
So we sold our house and we moved out here, and then they canceled the whole move.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's crazy because like really, really talented people didn't want to move, so they quit,
Wow.
and we lost a lot of really talented people. Um, but yeah, so I've been here since 2022. And like I said, we still do some licensed stuff, but mostly it's vertical.
Uh-huh.
And I still draw a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a director, I'm not supposed to be sitting at my desk as much as I do, but
Uh-huh.
that's
You're
what I
supposed to be
like.
kind of in
Yeah.
meetings and
Yeah. Yeah.
corporate
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
It's like that's like the big challenge with creatives is that like as you go up in your career, you get less and less creative, which is
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. You just have to
counterintuitive.
be right. You just have to be, you know, looking out for helping develop other people's careers and
Yeah.
trying to set up your team so that the work is consistent and interesting,
Yeah.
which has been fun. So, it's been great because it's like I said, we used to get turnaround drawings and now I think we're much more nimble. working with what we sometimes we call them napkin sketches. Sometimes they're so rough, but we know how to tell a story. So it's transformed my team from being seen as purely technicians, where somebody
Mm-hmm.
else is creative, somebody else has the idea, and you're just the technician that's going to build this for me, to where they come to us and they say, we need concepts for whatever. And so they recognize how creative my team is and how
That's
much
great.
we're able to fill in the blanks. Yeah, it's really been it's been rewarding.
Do you feel that you kind of helped facilitate that change from going from the more technician to the artists,
Yeah, well,
essentially?
I take full responsibility. Yes,
That's
absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. Because I think, like, to your point, like, I think it would be a shame to have like wasted talent. You know, people who are modelers, you know, are so much more capable than just modeling. You know, and to kind of stick them in a box and be like, okay, like here, like do exactly one to one. You know, okay, you know, but you could also, especially now with I don't know where you stand on all the AI stuff, but you know, at a certain point, if you lack the ability to create your own sort of works of art, you know, you can have essentially be replaced eventually, where it's like, okay, if I can just put in an image and get a 3D model that's exactly like the
Right.
image, okay, I could just get rid of the technicians, you know?
Yeah, right, exactly. I keep thinking the the humanity, the thing it is the thing you bring to it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I keep. I mean, maybe I'm being naive, but that's how I keep coaching everybody, is to try to understand that what you bring to it is your unique story and your unique impulses. And another corny thing I always say is, as a character artist, you know, you have to look at Shakespeare. Like, he wrote Hamlet and when, 500 years ago,
Yeah.
and all of the different performances you've seen of Hamlet, and each actor that plays Hamlet, the words are the same, the dialogue is the same, but it's what is it that actor, that artist brings to the performance that makes it unique. And I think that's, we're drawing Mickey Mouse. I didn't create Mickey Mouse
Right.
or Stitch or any of these characters, but my sense of posing and my sense of storytelling are going to come through
Yeah.
in how I perform. I remember meeting an animator when I was a kid. A guy lived down the street from me, worked in New York as an animator, and he worked on Strawberry Shortcake, which was like a really sweet little cartoon for girls. And he was a great big guy, and he was saying, well, and then he did Popeye. He worked for Fleischer in the 50s and the 40s and the 50s. And you say, I'm Popeye. I'm a rough, tough guy. And then, if I'm Strawberry Shortcake, let
Right.
me put on my little bonnet. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's crazy. But it's actually true, right? So I tell
Yeah.
people all the time, like, if you're going to be Winnie the Pooh, you got to put on that Winnie the Pooh costume, and you have to become Winnie the Pooh when you're drawing, and you got to tell that story in that very
Yeah.
specific way. And that's the
Yeah.
thing you can't replace. Like, that's what I don't think AI is going to be able to replace that.
Yeah.
It's going to make interesting visuals, I guess, but
Yeah. Yeah. It's
hopefully it's not just going to be artists putting in prompts into AI, or
right. Right.
maybe for me, the only thing I could see it being useful for me at my age is if I, want to come up with a bunch of different concepts, but I'm still going
Yeah.
to look at them and I think, oh, I might want to use that. I might use that. Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
idea. And then I'll take that and put it all together. But
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Like I think it's great for rapid concepting, but I mean, there's a lot of things about it, and kind of putting the ethics aside, just from a purely technical standpoint, like it where it stands now, and I don't know if it's ever gonna get over this hurdle, is that like it's not inherently creative, it's not breathing any life into anything, and so it lacks, like you're saying, it lacks that character that a human being brings
right,
into it, you know,
yeah,
and so. Like I think it's my mentor uses this great line. He says it's mid journey because it gets you half of the way there,
right,
and I think it's very true.
yeah,
You know, and it's for all the AI stuff, for the both the visual stuff and also the text based stuff. Like somebody had this great thing of, they called it the what was it, the 10-80-10 rule, where it's like you put in the first 10% of the work, you let's say for like writing, you put in the first 10% of kind of generating the idea, you let AI do kind of the middle stuff, all the stuff that's not so fun, and then you come in with the last 10% and kind of go in and tweak and put on your touch to like really get it how you want. And I think that sort of attitude is what's going to ultimately prevail, right? As in, people were against Photoshop when it came around too, but ultimately it's this idea of like, use it as a tool, not as a means to an end, and I think in a lot of conversations I've had with a lot of high level professionals, they all share this sentiment where that it really ultimately is just another tool, and like any tool, like,
and it's here to stay. So don't,
right.
You can deny it all you want, but it's here to stay.
Right.
Again, I look at a lot of portfolios and I speak at schools and kids, when I went to school, we, worked with traditional media, and now kids, a lot of the stuff I saw when I would speak at schools, it's not even in Photoshop, it's on the iPad, it's in Procreate.
Yeah.
So everybody's working on a screen that's this big. They're limited by okay, I'm going to do a fake watercolor, but you don't even know how to do a real watercolor, and you don't even know the techniques you're trying to emulate.
Right.
I think it's so limiting. And then it's like a great equalizer. Everybody's work looks the same.
Yeah.
And particularly kids that want to get into animation, they keep looking at the same stuff. They're all inspired by the same stuff. They all want their drawings to look the same. And I'm like, I studied illustration, and the whole thing about it was figuring out what your style is, your own unique point of view and your unique handwriting. But there's like a whole generation of kids that don't want that. They just want to fit into whatever the corporate thing is.
Yeah.
I think you have to have your own point of view and your own handwriting. And that's the thing that's going to separate you from AI. I think AI is going to wipe out a lot of, it's going to separate the wheat from the chaff.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. No, just to that point, like, you do see a lot of the kind of, and especially in the age of streaming, where there's 1,000,001 options of content to consume. But kind of on the flip side, and the silver lining, if you will, is that then those projects that are really excellent, like really come to the top. And, just the ones that kind of like the things that come to the top of mind are like, like when Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse came around, like that was so different than anything we had seen before. That like it really like it was not like the other animated movies coming out. It was not like the other superhero movies. It really felt fresh, and I'm optimistic, and I think that there are still true artists out there who really do have the ability to create really unique things. But yeah, it's like you're saying, it's kind of all these tools are the great equalizer where kind of anyone can do it now. So now to be extraordinary, you really have to, be heads and shoulders above everybody else, which is a little bit daunting, but it's then you have the two people, either people who kind of shy away from it, or the people who rise to the challenge.
I think you have to, again, another thing that I see is, okay, I want to be a digital modeler, and that's all that people look at is digital modeling. They don't look at sculpture. They have no idea, look at Michelangelo, look at Bernini, look at, there's lots of sculpture.
Yeah.
Look at traditional art. Go to an art museum. It's weird how many artists don't really like art. They just like the thing.
They like ArtStation.
Instagram.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I one time had, so in that class I was talking about before that Paul Gabry gave, so he brought in like 3 guest speakers, and one of them was a guy by the name of Joseph Mena, and he's you know him?
Yeah, I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's the chief sculptor at the U.S. Mint,
right?
And his career, like he, kind of like a big part of the beginning of his career was collectibles, like superhero collectibles. Yeah. But he went to school in I'm gonna get this wrong. I think it was Russia, maybe Germany. Maybe it was Germany. He went to like this like prestigious European art school, and just the way he talked about art and sculpture was so different than anything I'd ever heard any, like you're saying, any kind of like traditional 3D modeler talk. Like he spoke about the art and the sculpture and again, he was talking about in the context of creating collectibles, right?
Right.
Like these,
Right.
it's the same thing that 101 other people are doing, but you could just see the way that he approached it was so like magnificent, and it was kind of beautiful to listen to,
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, that's the advice I give kids all the time is, go look at art and stop looking at the same stuff that everybody else is looking at. I mean, be
Yeah.
inspired by that stuff. I'm not saying it's bad, it's fine. It's just that
Right.
everybody else is looking at the same thing.
Right. Right.
And then people will reach out, oh, could you look at my portfolio and give me advice? And I mean, I start talking about storytelling and things, and they'll say, well, I've been watching this guy on YouTube and I've been doing his tutorials. And I'm like, that guy is working on YouTube because he doesn't have a job.
Right.
Right. Like, okay, maybe he's got some talent and maybe he's teaching you something that you didn't know before, but he doesn't have all the answers. You know what I mean? You got to
Right.
find
Right.
more than just the guy on YouTube.
Yeah. No, so I had this conversation. One of my first episodes I recorded was with Solomon Blair, who also was on the ZBrush team for a while. And he said this basically the exact same thing with this idea of like YouTube versus art school, where like a lot of people get the satisfaction of watching a YouTube video and kind of copying it and be like, oh look, I made a piece of artwork. He's like, but you're not understanding, like, and not to sound like an art snob, but it's just like you're not understanding like what makes this thing, like what breathes life into it. Like, okay, very nice. Like you can follow steps and then I can go rewatch the video to kind of figure it out. But like you do, if you really want to learn the skills in a way of like internalizing them, you need to really kind of there's a lot more to it than just do this, then do that, and then you have a finished piece.
Yeah. Hours and hours and hours of drawing, not just watching YouTube videos, which is fine. I mean, I wish I had YouTube when I was a kid. What if I was go to the library and looking for anything on animation, you'd be lucky to find one book.
Yeah.
So, information when I was a kid was really hard to come by. So I think YouTube and Instagram and all the social media and all that stuff is great, but I just think it's limiting. I think it's limiting, and people have to really try to push themselves a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Just to wrap things up, it's one last question that I try to post all my guests, and that is, how do you define success?
Well, that's a good question. I think that even though I've been very successful with Disney, if I'm not working on my own work, I find I'm getting depressed, and then it starts to impact my day to day. So success is really that I say as an artist, my success is being able to speak in my own voice, use my own handwriting, and I'm going to do it within the confines of the Disney Corporation. But then I'm also going to do it in my own personal work. I can't separate the fact that I have a steady job and I have steady paycheck and benefits, and I was able to put my kids through school, et cetera, et cetera. It's not all like pixie dust. But I think ultimately the success for me is doing my own work. Right, having like I said, my own voice and working my own handwriting.
Yeah, that's very well said. Where can everybody find you online, social media, and all the good stuff?
I'm on Instagram at my initials are JTQ3, John Thomas Quinn III. So I'm at JTQ3 on Instagram.
Amazing.
That's pretty much it. I have a couple of blogs. One of them I forget what it's called. I never go to it. There might be a link on my Instagram, but
all right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. This is a wonderful conversation. I really do appreciate your time.
Okay. Well, thanks for doing it.